Beneath the quiet streets of Malta, there lies a place older than legend, a temple carved entirely underground, where sound itself seems to breathe. It was not built by any known civilization, nor does it resemble anything found above the earth. It is called the Hypogeum of Saflieni, the underworld of the sleeping gods. The story begins by accident. In 1902, a stonemason was working in a small house in the Maltese town of Paola. He was cutting through rock to build the foundations for a new building when his pick struck something hollow. Behind the stone wall was darkness, a hidden chamber, silent and deep. When he broke through, a gust of cold air escaped from the hole, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and age. He lit a small lamp and peered inside. The light revealed a tunnel carved into solid limestone, leading downward into the unknown. He thought he had found a cave. He was wrong. When authorities arrived and widened the entrance, they discovered something astonishing: an entire world beneath the earth. Passages led from one chamber to another, each perfectly cut from stone, each older than anything they had ever seen on the island. It wasn't a quarry, nor a tomb. It was architecture, precise, deliberate, almost impossibly ancient. As excavations began, archaeologists realized they were looking at something unique in all of human history. The structure was vast, 3 levels descending deep into the bedrock. The upper chambers were wide and simple, the lower ones complex and hauntingly beautiful. And everywhere they looked, there were signs of design far beyond what stone tools should have allowed. Walls were polished smooth, curves followed perfect symmetry, and ceilings were carved to echo the sound of a human voice. In one central chamber, now called the Oracle Room, a whisper could travel through the entire complex, resonating like a chant from the earth itself. It was as if the structure had been tuned, like an instrument to amplify sound. But who could have done this, thousands of years before the pyramids? The Maltese Islands are small. Their population in prehistoric times would have been measured in thousands, not tens of thousands. Yet what they left behind was monumental. The Hypogeum is estimated to be more than 5,000 years old, dating to around 3,300 BCE. That makes it older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. And unlike either, it was built entirely underground, in total darkness. The discovery of the Hypogeum shook the archaeological world. It suggested that Malta, a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean, had once been home to a civilization capable of astonishing precision and vision. No one knew who they were. They left behind no writing, no tools, no clear explanation. Only silence and stone. The first archaeologists who descended into the Hypogeum described it with awe and unease. One wrote that it felt as if the chambers were alive with sound, that even a breath seemed to hum against the walls. Another described hearing a low tone that had no source, as though the stone itself were speaking. As they explored deeper, they found more than architecture. They found bones, thousands of them. Men, women, and children, all buried carefully, layer upon layer, across centuries. The Hypogeum had not just been a temple, it was also a tomb. But unlike ordinary burials, these were arranged with purpose. Bodies were laid in circular chambers, their heads pointing inward, as if facing something unseen at the center. Beside them were offerings, shells, figurines, small red ochre painted pottery, and sculptures of strange human figures unlike anything found elsewhere. The most famous of these is a small statue of a sleeping woman, the Sleeping Lady of Malta. Carved from limestone, she lies curled on her side, peaceful and heavy, draped in patterned cloth. Her body is rounded, her expression serene. Some say she represents fertility. Others believe she is death itself, a spirit resting in eternal silence. To this day, no one knows what the Hypogeum was truly built for: a temple for the dead, a sanctuary for rituals, a place to speak with the gods, or something far stranger, a structure that used sound to alter consciousness, a kind of prehistoric cathedral of resonance. Because when scientists later studied the Hypogeum's acoustics, they found something remarkable. Certain chambers amplify low frequencies between 70 and 130 Hz, the same range as the male human voice. When someone speaks or chants inside, the sound vibrates through the walls and through the body of anyone listening. It doesn't just echo, it resonates. You don't hear it only with your ears, you feel it in your bones. Imagine a group of people standing in that darkness 5,000 years ago. Torches flicker. A single voice begins to chant, and the sound travels through the walls, wrapping around the listeners, filling the chamber with vibration. The air trembles. The light wavers. And for a moment, it feels as though the earth itself is singing. It must have felt like standing inside a heartbeat. Whatever its purpose, the Hypogeum shows us something profound, that even at the dawn of civilization, humans were not only builders of stone, but seekers of meaning. They carved into rock not for shelter, but for connection, with death, with gods, with sound, with the earth itself. Today, visitors are allowed only in small groups, under strict supervision. Only a handful can enter each day, and no one is allowed to touch the walls. The air is fragile. Too much humidity, too much breath could destroy what time has preserved for millennia. But those who have walked its halls say the same thing, that in the stillness, in the darkness, you feel watched, not by eyes, but by presence, that the silence of the Hypogeum is not empty, it is full. Who were the people who built the Hypogeum? That question has haunted archaeologists for more than a century. No one knows their names, their language, or even where they came from. They appeared on the island of Malta around 5,900 years ago, a small group of settlers who would, in time, create one of the most extraordinary cultures in prehistory. They are known today as the temple builders of Malta, and what they left behind is unlike anything else in the ancient world. Across the islands, their monuments rise from the ground like fossils of another age: Gantija, Hagar-Kim, Mnidra, vast megalithic temples built from stones heavier than elephants. They are the oldest freestanding structures ever discovered, older even than the pyramids of Egypt. And while those temples reached upward toward the sun, the Hypogeum reached downward, a mirror image beneath the earth. It was as if the builders were trying to connect heaven and underworld, light and shadow, balancing the world above with a world below. Their tools were simple: stone hammers, antler picks, and ropes, yet their precision remains astonishing. The walls of the Hypogeum are carved smooth as marble. Curves flow perfectly from one chamber to another, and the entire structure aligns with mathematical care. Even with modern instruments, archaeologists can barely explain how such accuracy was possible. What's even stranger is that the builders seem to have no enemies, no signs of war, and no fortifications. They lived in peace for nearly 2,000 years, building, carving, and burying their dead in rituals of silence. Their world was one of faith, harmony, and mystery. But faith in what? The artifacts found inside the Hypogeum give us clues, but not answers. Dozens of small figurines show human forms with round bodies, heavy limbs, and calm faces. They are neither gods nor monsters. They are human, yet not entirely. Some seem asleep, others watchful. Their eyes are large and open, their expressions peaceful but distant. One of the most famous statues shows a headless figure seated on a throne. Its body is broad and powerful, its hands resting calmly on its knees. Archaeologists named it the Headless Goddess, though no one knows what it truly represents. Some believe the head was removable, replaced during rituals to symbolize transformation, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Whatever the truth, these sculptures show that the builders of Malta had a deep relationship with both life and death. Their temples, whether above or below ground, were never simply places of worship. They were instruments, built to bridge the visible and the unseen. The Hypogeum, with its perfect acoustics, may have been the center of this spiritual system. Imagine priests or shamans chanting inside the oracle chamber, their voices vibrating through the walls, creating a deep hum that filled the listeners' bodies. The sound would resonate in their bones, slowing the heartbeat, altering the rhythm of the mind. Modern researchers who tested this resonance have found that such frequencies can cause trance-like states, even hallucinations. If this is true, then the Hypogeum was not just a temple, it was a machine for consciousness, a place where humans could touch the edge of something beyond understanding. The builders lived in small stone villages scattered across the island, surrounded by fields and sea. They grew grain, kept livestock, and traded shells and pottery with nearby islands. But their culture was not driven by war or empire. It was driven by something else: the desire to build, to shape the earth into meaning, to turn rock into memory. Their temples above ground were built in harmony with the sun, each aligned with solstices and equinoxes, their doorways perfectly positioned to catch the first rays of morning light. The hypogeum, meanwhile, was aligned with sound, the invisible force that moves through darkness. Together, they formed a complete world, light and shadow, day and night, life and death, sound and silence. It is difficult to imagine what these people thought when they carved their way into the limestone beneath their feet. Did they see it as creation or as descent? Were they building a sanctuary or returning to something older, something the rest of the world had forgotten? We may never know. What we do know is that their work was deliberate. Every curve, every chamber, every sound was intentional. There is no sign of accident or haste. They carved the hypogeum over generations, perhaps over centuries, passing down the knowledge from one group of artisans to the next. And then one day, they stopped. Around 2500 BCE, their civilization vanished. No one knows why. There are no signs of war, no evidence of plague or invasion. The temples were left standing, the hypogeum sealed and silent. It was as if the builders simply walked away, or were swallowed by the earth they had worshipped. For 1,000 years, Malta lay quiet. When new settlers arrived, they found the temples already ancient, their meanings already lost. They lived among ruins they could not understand, and the hypogeum was forgotten, sealed by time. It is easy to imagine that the builders wanted it that way, that they did not want their temple to be discovered, that it was never meant for eyes that could not hear its sound. In that silence, their story became legend. Locals spoke of caves that breathed, of tunnels that went on forever, of sounds that made the earth tremble. And when the mason's pick struck stone thousands of years later, it was as if the builders had been waiting, waiting to be found, waiting to be remembered. If stone could speak, what would it say? Inside the hypogeum, the answer is sound, not words, but vibration, a living hum that seems to move through the air and through the body. For centuries, the temple lay in silence. Then, when archaeologists first stepped into its chambers in the early 1900s, they noticed something strange. When they spoke, their voices did not echo in the usual way. Instead, the sound deepened, growing rounder, warmer, almost alive. A whisper carried farther than it should. A breath became a murmur. And when they spoke in unison, the walls seemed to sing back. At first, they thought it was an illusion, a trick of the mind in a confined space. But as more people entered, the effect became undeniable. Some said it felt like the air itself was vibrating. Others described it as standing inside a human chest, as if the entire temple were breathing with them. The most powerful of these chambers was later named the Oracle Room. It is a small space carved with perfect precision, with walls that curve inward like the inside of a shell. When someone speaks inside it, the sound travels through the entire structure, carrying a low, resonant hum that can be heard from the farthest levels below. Every surface amplifies the frequency. It does not fade. It lingers, wrapping itself around the listener until silence returns. Modern researchers have tested the chamber's acoustics, and their findings are remarkable. Certain tones, especially those between 70 and 130 Hz, the same range as a deep male voice, resonate perfectly with the stone. When those tones are sustained, the sound begins to move through the human body, vibrating in the bones and the chest cavity. It is not simply heard, it is felt. This effect has a profound influence on the human mind. Scientists studying infrasound and resonance have found that low frequencies can alter brain activity, slowing heart rate, changing perception of time, even inducing trance-like states. Inside the hypogeum, the combination of darkness, vibration, and isolation creates a sensory experience unlike any other. It is easy to imagine how ancient rituals might have used this phenomenon, not for performance, but for transformation. Imagine standing in that chamber 5,000 years ago. You are surrounded by flickering torchlight, shadows dancing across red ochre walls. The air smells of oil and stone. A voice begins to chant, low, steady, rhythmic. The sound fills the room, growing louder, deeper, until it feels like the earth itself is singing. Your heartbeat synchronizes with the vibration. The mind begins to drift. And in that darkness, perhaps you feel the boundary between self and world dissolve. It's possible that this was the purpose of the hypogeum, not a place of death, but of awakening. A space designed to connect the physical and the spiritual through resonance, an instrument built not for music, but for consciousness. The ancient builders may not have understood frequency in scientific terms, but they understood its power. Across many ancient cultures, sound was sacred. In Egypt, the spoken word was believed to create reality itself. In India, the universe began with vibration, with the sound Om. And on Malta, that same truth may have been carved into stone. Even the Hypogeum's architecture seems built around the principle of sound. The curved walls, domed ceilings, and smooth surfaces all enhance resonance. There are no sharp edges, no corners to scatter the waves. It is designed deliberately to make the human voice eternal. When modern acousticians brought instruments into the Hypogeum, they discovered that its sound frequencies match those used in ancient chanting rituals found across the world. The same tones appear in Tibetan temples, in Gregorian chants, and even in the natural resonance of the Earth's crust. Whether coincidence or not, the result is the same. When sound is made inside the Hypogeum, it feels alive. There are stories of people who experienced strange sensations inside. Some felt dizzy, others emotional, as though the vibration had unlocked hidden memories. A few even claimed to hear harmonics that had no source, tones that seemed to emerge from the walls themselves. The guides dismissed these as imagination, but those who've been there know better. The sound of the Hypogeum is not ordinary. It is something between science and mystery, too precise to be accidental, too profound to be fully explained. It is said that sound can shape matter. Modern experiments show that vibrations can move particles of sand into intricate patterns, geometry born from frequency. If that's true, then perhaps the Hypogeum's builders knew this long before we rediscovered it. Perhaps they carved their temple as a way to harmonize body and stone, spirit and sound. One researcher called it a human tuning chamber. Another described it as a cathedral of resonance. Both are true. It is a place that reminds us that ancient people were not primitive. They were observant. They were sensitive to the forces we no longer notice. The way the earth hums beneath our feet. The way sound can carry emotion deeper than words ever could. When the excavation teams finally finished their studies and sealed parts of the Hypogeum for preservation, they recorded the ambient noise one last time. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a soft, continuous vibration, somewhere between breath and heartbeat. It was not machinery. It was not wind. It was simply the stone, alive with the same hum that had echoed for 5,000 years. For the builders, that sound might have been the voice of creation itself, a reminder that the earth is not silent, only waiting to be heard. The deeper you go into the Hypogeum, the quieter the world becomes. Sound changes, no longer echoing but absorbed. It feels as though the earth itself is listening. The upper chambers are grand and open, lined with carved walls and faint traces of red ochre. But as you descend, the air grows heavier, cooler, still. The light from your torch begins to fade into the stone, and the silence thickens until even your heartbeat seems too loud. The lower level lies more than 30 feet below the surface. Few have ever entered it. Even archaeologists approach it with caution, not out of superstition, but because the air is fragile, trapped for thousands of years. One breath too many, one misplaced light, and the balance of this underworld can change. Down there, the chambers twist and narrow. The ceilings drop low. The walls seem to breathe moisture, glistening faintly in the dim light. And it's here, in the deepest part, that the most mysterious discoveries were made. When the Hypogeum was first excavated, thousands of bones were removed from its depths. Among them were skulls, hundreds of them, some of which did not look entirely human. Their shape was elongated, their cranial capacity larger than normal. Early reports noted the absence of the median suture, a line of bone that divides the human skull. At the time, it caused speculation that these remains might belong to an unknown people, perhaps a priestly class or something older. Today, most scientists believe these skulls were simply deformed naturally or ritually, as was common in ancient cultures. But the legends that grew around them refused to fade. In Malta's folklore, people still speak of the long-headed ones, beings who came before humanity, who lived beneath the earth and spoke in tones that could move stone. Even stranger are the stories of what happened during the early excavations. It's said that in the 1940s, a group of students from the National Geographic Society was allowed to explore the lower levels. They descended into a newly opened passage, guided by locals, and were never seen again. The tunnel was sealed shortly after. Officially, there is no record of their disappearance, no names, no reports, only whispers. But in Malta, whispers last a long time. Some say the tunnels extend far beyond what has been mapped, miles of passages connecting to the ancient quarries, to the sea, even to other islands. Others claim that strange lights and sounds have been seen near the sealed doors, faint vibrations, a hum that rises from the ground at night. The government denies it, of course, but those who have lived near the Hypogeum for generations speak differently. They say the earth below still stirs, that sometimes in the small hours the stones seem to breathe. What's undeniable is that the Hypogeum's lower levels are unlike anything else built by humans of that age. They are carved not for beauty or function, but for mystery. The chambers are circular, connected by narrow shafts, some too tight for a person to pass through comfortably. Others open into vast domed spaces, their ceilings supported by pillars shaped like ribs. In one chamber, the floor dips into a basin of unknown purpose, perhaps for water, perhaps for sound. In another, niches are carved into the walls, perfectly symmetrical, as though made for offerings or for the placement of light. The further down you go, the more it feels less like a temple and more like a body, a living structure with arteries, lungs, and heart. The deeper chambers vibrate at frequencies lower than the human voice. Stand still long enough and you can feel it, a slow, almost imperceptible pulse in the stone. For those who have worked inside, the feeling is unforgettable. One archaeologist described it as being watched by something vast but silent. Another refused to go back, saying only that it listens. It is said that when torches were first lit in the deepest room, the smoke rose in perfect spirals, not drifting randomly, but spinning upward as if drawn by an invisible current. Even today, no one knows why. Perhaps the air moves in unseen ways through the passages, or perhaps the structure was built to breathe, a living instrument tuned by the ancients to resonate with the planet itself. If that sounds impossible, remember that the Hypogeum's builders already understood the relationship between sound and space in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. They carved chambers that could sustain vibration. They aligned tunnels that carried light and wind, and they buried their dead where sound could reach them. Perhaps the lower levels were not meant for the living at all, but for the dead, to let their spirits remain part of the song that filled the stone. There's a legend that says those who enter the deepest level never truly leave, that even if they walk out into the sunlight, part of them stays behind, a voice in the echo, a breath in the hum. Visitors who have been there say the same thing. When you close your eyes in the lower chambers, it feels as though the ground beneath your feet is moving, slowly, like the surface of the sea. Not rocking, but breathing, alive. Today, the lowest level of the Hypogeum is sealed. No visitors are allowed beyond the second level, and no new excavations are permitted. The government says it's for preservation, that the humidity and temperature must remain stable to protect the walls. And perhaps that's true. But it's also true that some places are better left alone. The Hypogeum was never meant for us. It was built for another time, another people, another understanding of the world. To stand in its deepest chambers is to feel that truth. It is not just an ancient monument, it is a threshold, a place where the living meet the memory of the dead, and the earth remembers what it once held. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of everything waiting to be heard. In the Hypogeum of Malta, that silence feels alive. It hums faintly beneath the stone, not loud enough to hear, but deep enough to feel. It's as if the earth itself remembers the voices that once filled its hollow chambers and carries them still, vibrating in the bones of the island. Today, visitors to the Hypogeum walk carefully through narrow corridors, their footsteps muffled by centuries of dust. Their voices are quiet, almost whispers. They look at the walls, the carvings, the niches, the sleeping chambers, and they wonder how it was all done. No one knows the answer. No machines, no writing, no record of how such perfect symmetry was achieved. Only the stone remains, and the sound that lives within it. Scientists have studied the Hypogeum for decades, and still the questions multiply. The resonance of the oracle chamber, for example, no one can fully explain why its frequency aligns so precisely with the human voice. It's not random, it's intentional. Whoever carved those walls understood something fundamental about vibration, about the way sound interacts with space and matter. In that sense, the Hypogeum is not just an ancient monument. It is a message written in frequency, a conversation between humans and the planet itself. In recent years, new technologies have allowed researchers to map the Hypogeum in unprecedented detail. Laser scans reveal that its chambers form patterns that seem organic, spirals, curves, and arcs that mimic natural forms like shells and waves. The stone itself, limestone, is porous and resonant, ideal for carrying vibration. When sound moves through it, the walls tremble microscopically, amplifying the energy. Some have called it the first acoustic instrument ever built. It's hard to know whether the builders understood these effects scientifically or intuitively. But perhaps that distinction doesn't matter. They were listening to the world in ways we've forgotten, not through equations, but through presence. To carve the Hypogeum was to listen to the earth breathe and to shape that breath into form. Sound has always been a bridge between the physical and the unseen. It travels through air, water, and flesh. It cannot be held, only felt. And yet it shapes everything, the way we think, feel, and even remember. Inside the Hypogeum, that truth becomes real. Every tone, every vibration connects body to stone, present to past, the living to the dead. There is a story told by one of the last workers to restore the site in the 1960s. He said that while working alone in the lower chamber one evening, he began to hum softly, just to pass the time. The sound deepened, grew louder, until it filled the room. He stopped, but the hum continued. He swore he could feel it in his chest, in his teeth, even in his heartbeat. When he left, the air still trembled. He never went down again. To this day, no one knows exactly where the vibration originates. Perhaps it is an illusion of acoustics, an echo of footsteps, a trick of low frequency. Or perhaps it is something older, a resonance that has never stopped since the day it was carved. The Hypogeum is more than a burial site, more than a temple. It is a reminder that ancient people did not fear the earth. They entered it willingly. They saw the world as alive, every stone a heartbeat, every echo a voice. To them, the underground was not a place of darkness, but of transformation. To descend into the earth was to return to the beginning, to the sound that made the world. Modern Malta moves above it, unaware of the slow vibration below. Cars pass, voices echo through streets, and tourists take photos without realizing that beneath their feet lies a civilization older than history. The Hypogeum endures, sealed from the noise of the modern world, breathing in silence. Every now and then, sensors placed inside record faint tremors, not earthquakes, but subtle oscillations. They come irregularly, like a distant rhythm. No one can trace their cause, but those who know the temple say it's the song of the stone, the forgotten song. Maybe that's all the builders wanted to leave behind, a sound that would never stop, a frequency that would carry memory through time, long after their language, their faces, and their names were gone. Because when you think about it, that's what all civilizations try to do, to make something that lasts. The Hypogeum's builders didn't carve their names into the walls. They carved sound into stone. And 5,000 years later, we can still hear it. In the end, that's what the Hypogeum teaches us, that silence is not empty. It's full of memory, that the world is not dead, but resonant. And that maybe, when we listen closely enough, we can still hear the echo of the first voices, rising softly from the heart of the earth. The Hypogeum remains sealed, lit only by faint electric lamps, guarded from time and touch. But beneath the dust and the stone, its song continues, a slow, eternal vibration, older than words, older than history. It waits in the darkness, humming softly beneath the island of Malta. And if you stand still enough, if you listen long enough, you might hear it too.